Good morning. My name is Ulrich GENSCHEL. I welcome everybody with us today online or here in Brussels to this webinar on lump sum funding. I hope this is well timed for the 2025 calls. The program has been published not so long ago, and quite a number of calls are going to use lump sums. So I hope that all the applicants for those calls have the chance to learn about lump sums today, if you aren't familiar with that already. My name is Ulrich GENSCHEL. I'm head of sector in DG RTD of the European Commission, working on the simplification of our processes for this program. And together with my colleague, Andreia CHICOS, I'm going to lead you through the webinar today. I'm going to start with a presentation taking you through the main steps. And then we are going to discuss with 4 guests who already have good experience with lump sums and who will share their experience with you. That will be followed by a third part where we are going to go through your questions in a Q&A session. We really have a lot of time planned in for this Q&A session. So I hope to go through all the main questions you post on Slido. I suggest you even wait while Slido is already open for your questions to be put in. I suggest you even wait until you have seen the presentation and until you've listened to the discussion and the experience of our guests. Then there will be a short break where you could have all the remaining questions you have put in Slido, and then we'll have plenty of time to look at those. So I hope that some of your questions will already be answered in the next hour or so, and then we are going to look at the remaining questions. Before I start, one general remark. Lump sum funding has been designed to be as similar as possible to our traditional grants. So this presentation is really focusing on what is different. We are not going to be able to cover every last detail of the project lifecycle of Horizon funding, but look at what is really different in lump sum funding. But you'll also see where further information is available. So let's get started. Why do we use lump sum funding in the first place? There are 3 main reasons in no particular order. And that is we need to reduce the financial error rates. Research spending in the European budget has traditionally been for many years the part with the highest error rates, and all institutions involved agree this needs to be reduced, and we see lump sums as a key measure to achieve that. There is significant simplification potential simply because the actual cost system is so complex, and despite all effort, it remains complex, and we keep seeing high error rates, particularly among the beneficiaries who are new to the program or don't have the capacity to really get into the details of the actual cost rules and conditions. And then last but not least, we really also want to focus more on content. We believe that is in a way an automatic windfall, an automatic positive side effect, because as soon as we have in lump sums payments connected and linked to the completion of the project, that will automatically get more focus and more attention from all involved as compared to the traditional system where we link payments to costs, to money having been spent. There are 2 different philosophies, and here we really see with linking payments to completing the activities in the project, we're going to hear more about that in the next half hour or so, we get a bigger focus on content, which is desired indeed. These statistics are maybe less important for you, just to illustrate that the people who come to our program are really quite different. We have few, you see this on the right-hand side of this graph, we have very few very large organizations defined as those that have 100 grants or more in the framework program. And on the left-hand side, we see the vast majority of individual organizations that have just 1 grant. It's out of the 42 or so thousand beneficiaries we had in Horizon 2020. It is like 2/3, it's like 3/4 that had 1 or 2 grants. only. And if an organization has 1 or 2 grants in a 7-year period, they're probably not going to have professional staff and the experience necessary to really deal with all the complexities of actual cost funding. And indeed, we see that among those, it is where we have much higher error rates, unsurprisingly, perhaps. And this is indeed what we want to address with lump sum funding to make the program work also for that important part of the beneficiaries and of the stakeholders. And we believe that lump sum is the answer here because it can work for all of us, for all of the participants. So, we have been introducing this 2018, so that's already quite some time ago, but still we see some concerns and some misunderstandings. So most prominently probably is the concern that there is more work to set up the proposal. And yes, there is an extra step. We're going to see this, namely that you have to justify the budget in more detail. Having said that, there is no doubt also the need to have these kind of details. People have trying to be have disagreed with this view, but there is really no doubt the rules and the obligations that applicants have in all our grants is to base their budgeting on detailed cost estimations, even in case they only share more global budget figures with us. The obligation to have these details exists in all grants. Therefore, the additional work compared to that baseline is rather limited, namely to put these details in a template that we provide. Well, there is the idea that you have less flexibility in grant management, but that really comes under a misunderstanding already, because if anything, lump sum grants give you the full flexibility to carry out your project in any way you like. We are only following that you are doing the activities as they have been agreed. And of course, you have exactly the same flexibility as in any other grant. You following the same standards and the same rules, even the same processes to amend your project in the course of the grant. It goes without saying that whether we fund a research project through lump sums or through actual costs, there is no difference in the need to adjust the project as we go along, as conditions change, as new knowledge is gained, and indeed, therefore, you have the need to adjust and amend your project accordingly. But that works in exactly the same way in all our grants, and lump sums make no exception. And then maybe last, I still mentioned the idea that you have a high financial risk, but that really is not borne out by the facts. Again, I show you some data later. If anything, lump sums are on average paid to a slightly higher degree than actual cost grants. But all in all, I think the message here is all our grants are typically paid almost to the maximum grant amount, very closely to the maximum grant amount, 98, 99%. And within these small margins of difference, if anything, lump sums come out a bit higher than actual costs, but certainly not lower. Maybe the one I would still like to mention here, this idea that has been a classic since the beginning of lump sum funding, that we only pay you in case your project is successful. Clearly not the case. We pay when the activities have been done, but there is no condition to be successful. The only condition is that the project took place in the way it was, essentially in the way it was agreed. That is the measuring stick that we apply, and we have some maneuver. We have some room for maneuver, and we have some. We can deviate from that, so it's not super strict. But of course, we want to see, that is the essential message. We want to see that this project has been overall implemented as it was agreed, and that will trigger the payment. So we have 2 different types of lump sum introduced. In type 1, we use a fixed lump sum, so the applicant has no choice. The fixed amount has to be applied for, and if successful, we'll get exactly that amount. There's only one current example. These are the ERC proof of concept grants for 150,000 euro fixed lump sum. And then we have type 2, which is even more closely modeled on the traditional actual cost system, where the applicants define the amount they would like to request in line with the conditions and the information given in the work program. So the overall budget envelope that you apply for is exactly the same and follows the same logic as an actual cost grants. The only difference is in this type 2 lump sums, you provide more details on what makes up this maximum grant amount that you are requesting. So, and how does that work? When you write your lump sum proposals, basically, as I mentioned already, most of the things are exactly like in any other proposal. So you use the standard application form. It is no different from, it is the same application form as for all other grants. So there is nothing lump sum specific to it. And you present your objectives and the methodology of your project in exactly the same way. Likewise, and we've given some more guidance on this in the application form, how to describe and to what level of detail to describe the activities in each work package. Now, the additional part, and that I mentioned already, is this detailed budget table, and that is an Excel file currently. We are working on integrating that budget file in the online submission system. Bear with me for a couple of more months, and I hope that'll be ready. It'll be ready by then. If you are applying for the 2025 call using lump sum, then you are still going to use this Excel file most likely. So this is what you will find. You will find a template in the submission system of the topic you are applying to, and make sure that you use that form, not some other copy that might be available online or that might be circulating. Use exactly and only the form, the template that is available in the online system of your specific topic. So in that Excel table, the key principle is that you have to provide cost estimations for each cost category, and you have to resolve them by beneficiary and by work package. These cost estimations, they don't need to be accurate in the sense of actual costs being accurate after they have been incurred. What they need to be is they need to be a reasonable estimation, a plausible estimation of your project costs in line with your usual practices. So the measuring stick again here is your cost estimations must be reasonable and non-excessive, in line with your usual practices. And of course, they must be adapted to what you propose. And this is exactly what we'll ask our experts to check in the evaluation. This Excel tool will then calculate your inputs into a lump sum share per beneficiary per work package, and we're going to see what this looks like. This is the result which will become part of the grant agreement if you are successful in the evaluation. Make sure that you look at the instructions that are on the first page of that Excel table to understand its logic and what needs to go where and what justification might be needed and where to put it. One other point to pay attention to is the work package design. So starting point again is you can design your work package exactly as in any other grant. However, in lump sums, you have an additional possibility, and I stress very much it's a possibility, it's an option. You are not obliged to follow it. If you are happy with the work package design that you use in traditional grants, keep that. That's fine. The only consideration that you should have is that in lump sums, work packages, the payments are triggered by work package completion. So any amount of work that you put in a work package will only be paid, will only be reimbursed once this work package is completed, reported as completed, and accepted as completed at the end of a reporting period. Therefore, you may, in order to optimize the cash flow in your project, you may split work packages along the borders of the reporting periods. So if you, for example, and I give you an example, I think already on the next slide. So if you think you if you imagine you have this work package for management that lasts the entire duration of the project in your traditional grant, then you can keep it as that. The consequence would, of course, be that you would only be paid for management at the end of the grant, because only in this scenario I have here at the top of the screen, this work package would only be completed at the end of the project. It could then be accepted and would then be paid. If you want to have your management work reimbursed earlier, the possibility you have is to split it here in this scenario for a 4-year project with 3 reporting periods, to split it in 3 work packages, which are effectively identical, which are just work package, making it into management work package 1, 2, 3. You wouldn't have to repeat the description of these work packages. You could, for the second and third, just refer to the first, because basically your management will be the same as at the middle and the end of the project will be the same as at the beginning. You don't have to re-describe the same tasks. And then with that setup, you of course would then be able to be paid at the end of reporting period 1, 2, in other words, at intermediate payment for the management work already done by then. The same principle can be applied to any other work package, as long as the work package still makes sense as a sizable, as a meaningful part of the project. We are not encouraging you to atomize your work packages, and we still ask our experts to make sure that the work program, the work package structure is still effective and reasonable for the project. Again, let me highlight, this is an option. This is because there were misunderstandings as well in the past. There is no obligation whatsoever to do this. It's purely and utterly only for you to optimize cash flow in case you think that's needed. And remember, in many of our projects, you'll have a pre-financing of 80%, in which case it is questionable whether this kind of optimization is really needed. Coming to the evaluation of your lump sum proposal. So again, what's the same as always is we use the standard evaluation criteria, excellence, impact, and implementation, and all of that works in exactly the same way as always. What is on top is the evaluation of the budget. The budget as such is not evaluated in actual cost grants, but here we really, because we define the maximum upfront and we agree, and we are not going to reopen that anymore after the grant is signed. Therefore, upfront, you need to justify your lump sum, and we are going to evaluate it. So the experts will look at your cost estimations, and as I mentioned before, they'll make sure this is reasonable, non-excessive, and they make sure that indeed the way the lump sum is split across the partners and across the work packages makes sense to complete this project. We will then ask our experts to make concrete recommendations in case they find this is not the case. And that will then be part of your evaluation summary report. And we will then, during grant preparation at the latest, adjust the lump sum and indeed cuts it to an extent in line with the recommendations from the experts. However, let me assure you, overall, the vast majority of funded lump sum grants had no cuts in our experience so far. I think we see in the order of 5 to 10% of the funded projects that had a cut. But again, then most of these cuts were rather minor, in the order of maybe 1% or 2% of the maximum amount, and bigger cuts are very rare. Also important for you to remember, if your budget is modified, this does not count as a shortcoming. It's just, we consider that a necessary correction to basically agree a plausible lump sum. It's not a shortcoming that decreases your score in most of the cases. A decrease of your score would only come if your budget is really flawed, if your budget is impossible to evaluate because major information is missing, or because it doesn't make any sense at all. It is really fully unaligned with the project you're proposing. So if there are really major problems with the budget you propose, indeed, that could then lead to a decrease in the score and therefore decrease your chances to be funded. But if there are a few corrections needed to get to a final lump sum, that has no effect on your score and therefore no effect on your chances to be selected for funding. One tool that our experts are using is the dashboard for lump sum evaluation, and that is a tool that provides historical data on personnel costs as they were funded by Horizon Europe in the last 3 years. We have, I think, The data were last refreshed in April 2025, and they are going to be refreshed again very soon in end of October, beginning November. So in a few weeks' time, we're going to have the next refresh. What these data show is that, well, what's very well known, personnel costs vary significantly between member states and other third countries that participate in the program, but they also vary a lot between different types of organizations, such as between universities, industry, small organizations. And we have resolved this data, therefore, across countries and across different types of organizations, such that our experts can see what is a reasonable amount of personnel costs per month. And they will check that against your inputs in the lump sum budget table. So I think you're well advised to have a look at this dashboard when you set up your budget, for you to know where you are in this distribution for your country and your type of organization. The simple principle that we apply is you can, of course, have costs which are above the distribution shown in the dashboard, in which case you would belong to the 20% most expensive organizations of that type in that country. And that is, of course, possible, and it also happens in actual cost grants. But in lump sum grants, we want from you a justification why that is so. Why are you more expensive than most of the peers, most of your peers? In other words, if you're a university in a given country, why are your costs among the highest in this country for universities? And there are a couple of reasons. We also give you some instructions in the in the budget table. Please make sure that in case you are in this situation, your costs are above the distribution shown in the dashboard. Make sure you provide a justification why that is necessary. And again, I can assure you, we have not really seen, we do see now and then cuts in the personnel costs, precisely when we see very high costs compared with the dashboard that are not justified or not sufficiently justified. But again, this is rather the exception than the rule. When we come to grant preparation, again, there is the standard procedure for grant preparation. No difference as such with other grants. There is in particular the no negotiation principle. Of course, for lump sums, you have a specific model grant agreement. That is the one for lump sums, not the standard model grant agreement. We can, in grant preparation phase, still correct obvious errors. The funding, the agency managing the grant can still have questions for clarifications. The principle is we can still have negotiations effectively on this lump sum if questions remain after the evaluation, because then once we sign the grant, the lump sum is not questioned. That is the principle, with the possible theoretical exception that we see a case of fraud and we have proof that the information furnished at proposal stage were fabricated and had no link to reality. So in case of fraud, effectively, that could be a possible theoretical exception, but the basis is once we have agreed on the lump sum, we are not touching it again. And this is why we do due diligence before we sign the grant. Now, the form that the budget takes at this point is not anymore these details. So the costs as such are not part of the grant agreement anymore, but what we are introducing in the grant agreement is a breakdown of lump sum shares that has been calculated based on your detailed inputs. And that is then the schedule for paying you during the grant, and we're going to see what this looks like. It's a breakdown where you have one share for each work package, where you have the lump sum resolved, I should say, by work package and by participant. And this is what it looks like. So essentially, this is the shape of Annex 2 in the grant agreement of a lump sum grant. You see in the rows the list of beneficiaries, and at the end of the row, the total contribution, lump sum contribution for that beneficiary. And you see in the columns the work packages, and then, in other words, and the figures you see in that table are the lump sum shares of the beneficiaries participating in each work package for the work packages where they have a role. So we will then, and the basic principle is that this lump sum being, of course, assigned to different beneficiaries and work packages can still be used as you see fit. We have no control over how you use this 3 million amount overall, because you're not reporting on it. You are reporting to us that you carry out the project, but you have infinite flexibility in using this. So if you want to share, no, if you want to adjust this table in the grant agreement, you need an amendment. But if you carry out the project and you are fine with the shares as they are in the grant agreement, there is no need for an amendment. So maybe I'm not expressing myself optimally here, but the point is you will always be paid your full lump sum as long as the grant is implemented satisfactorily. Then how the lump sum is shared among the beneficiaries is up to you, and how it is spent is up to you. This is invisible in lump sum grants to the Commission. We expect that the project is properly implemented, and that is what we are going to monitor and check. However, of course, the consortium is absolutely free, if you like, to change this schedule, to change this Annex 2, and as anything in the grant agreement, if you want to change the grant agreement, this is, of course, requiring an amendment, and it could be advisable for the consortium, basically for your internal relationship within the consortium, to have this payment schedule, this Annex 2, aligned to the reality of the project, and therefore it may be in your interest to amend it and adjust it to the realities of the project. However, that is not a request that will come from us. This is an option that you have. That is a big difference, because we don't know how you spent your grant and in which way it was used to implement the project. We are only interested in you are implementing your project. So therefore, you have amendments which are possible as always. I think here the main message is all types of amendments that can be done to a grant can also be done to a traditional grant, can also be done to a lump sum grant. There is one possible exception, and that is if a work package has been paid and accepted, that is considered as a closed part of the project and it cannot be amended anymore, because that's really, at this point, we have closed this chapter, we have agreed on it, we have paid it, therefore you can't amend it anymore. You can amend all the ongoing work packages or work packages that have not been started yet. That is maybe the only difference compared with an actual cost grant. Otherwise, the procedure for amendments has been aligned since Horizon Europe and is no different anymore between lump sums and actual cost. Exactly the same procedure. The same is true for the payment schedule. So you have a pre-financing payment, which again works according to the exact same logic as in actual cost grants. The typical pre-financing for a 2 reporting period project is 80%. The typical pre-financing for a 3 reporting period project is 53%. And if you have 4 reporting periods, it would go down further. I don't know the figure right now. So the more reporting periods you have, the longer typically your project is, and the lower the pre-financing is, because then you will also have more intermediate payments. And that links to what I said before, to the splitting of work packages, in particular in situations when you have a high pre-financing like 80%. Think carefully if really splitting work packages is adding any value for you, because you would with this massive pre-financing of 80%, you will have a big enough float to carry you through that project most likely. At the intermediate payment, we pay all the work packages that have been declared and accepted at that intermediate stage. There it's a black and white decision. So either we accept a work package in full or not. And if we accept it, we pay the amount that is in your schedule. If not, we give you the possibility to improve on that work package and report it later. And then at the payment of the balance, you can also have partial payments of work packages. So you have tried throughout the project to complete all the work packages, and if some remain uncompleted by the end of the project, you can justify, you can explain why you were not able to complete them, and then we would normally accept to pay them partially. So there is, again, sort of maybe a myth that work packages that have not been 100% completed, but only 85% completed will not be paid at all. No, that is really not true. And that would really also not be, that would really be inappropriate and legally very questionable. So what really happens is if a work package has been left incomplete, but is nearly complete, we will basically then pay the majority of the costs. That is something I'll still explain later. And these cases we do indeed see where we sometimes have cuts of 5%, 10% in case one or other small part of the work package was missing. We then find an agreement on how much it was really complete and pay that percentage. Otherwise, so in other words, the schedule is the same. The points in time during a project when payments are made are the same. The pre-financing before you start, intermediate payments after each reporting period, and a final payment at the end, also with the release of the mutual insurance mechanism amount that was retained at the beginning. For you to report, that is really where it is getting easy in financial terms. Now, again, you use all the standard templates. So you have a technical report, which remains exactly the same as before. Perhaps you can pay more attention to justifying why you consider work packages incomplete or complete, especially when you report work packages as complete. Tell the project officer why they are complete, to not leave any misunderstanding there, because this is then what you declare in your report as well. Which of your work packages are ongoing, which are complete, because those that are complete form automatically your request to be paid. The project officer will check if they agree if your work packages are complete, and if so, you will have the remaining part is automatically filled in and will automatically go for the payment of the amounts that we have agreed. Yeah, I stress again, completion of a work package, as we mentioned before, is not dependent on reaching success in the sense that the work that you have done delivered the results as you would have liked them or as you would have expected them. It is enough that you've actually done the work, that you've done the activities, and if you failed utterly and nothing came out of it, that is still fine in terms of payments, because of course we want you to be successful, but we don't make payments dependent on being successful. What is needed is that you demonstrate that you have done the work as described. So here you see an example how that is calculated. In this example, the coordinator has declared that work package 1 and work package 3 are complete. You see that work package 2 is incomplete because beneficiary C hasn't contributed or hasn't completed their part, so that's an incomplete one. Work package 4 is also incomplete. Several beneficiaries haven't yet done their work, and work package 5 has not even been started. So in this case, assuming that the project officer would agree that work package 1 and 3 are complete, you get the 2 shares for work package 1 and 3 is a payment of 700,000 euro in this case. And that is where lump sums are really nice and efficient, in that we have pre-agreed on the price for these work packages. If you declare a work package and the project officer agrees, everything else is automatic. The financial statement for all of the consortium is automatically generated. The coordinator confirms that indeed these work packages have been completed, and that's it in terms of financial reporting. It is really down to reporting which work packages have been completed. At the very end of the project, in addition to saying they were completed, you have the possibility to say they were partially completed. That is an option which you don't have at the intermediate payment. Now, of course, it's important to look at under which conditions we accept work packages. Since the completion of work packages triggers the payment, this is an important part. And the basic logic is that we accept them when the activities have been carried out. However, as I mentioned before, this is not really 100% strict, and you don't have to really follow your grant agreement to the letter. But what you have to do is that you have to really carry out your project essentially as it is described. So you can absolutely deviate, and it is enough that you have implemented the activities essentially. But you can also have other tasks. Sorry, you can have also done. You could have replaced tasks with other things. So you have carried out equivalent tasks. Of course, you cannot just delete parts of the project and do something that is much, much lighter and requiring a much lower effort. But if you replace tasks with equivalent tasks, and that makes sense scientifically or speaking or within the logic of that project, that should be accepted. As in other projects, if you want to be certain of that, you can, of course, have an amendment of the description of the action earlier on to make sure that your project is aligned with the reality of its implementation, and maybe, yeah, have an update of that description of the action in line with the needs. That happens in many projects, and again, is independent of whether you're on a lump sum or an actual cost grant. In a lump sum grant it can even be more helpful, perhaps, because then you have the certainty that, yes, the way my description of the action is drafted as a result of this amendment, I'm sure I can deliver, I can complete it. But beyond and apart from this possibility to amend your grant, you can always also report deviations. Your project, your technical report has a part that is called deviations, where you describe and justify deviations from the description of the action. Again, if that is plausible, that should normally be accepted in this, following the same standards as it would be accepted in an amendment. And as soon as your technical report is accepted, your deviation is accepted as well. So you have these two levels: report your deviations in the technical report, or take into account your deviations in an amendment and then have them in the latest version of your grant agreement. In both cases, the aim is to align your project to the realities of the latest state of the art, according to, that is relevant for your project, and allow you to carry out the work packages and be paid in full. So I mentioned already, possible to pay your work packages partially if you really haven't been able to complete them by the end of the project. Strictly speaking, you require a reason why you haven't been able to do that. That could be force majeure, or it could be technical, it could be research reasons that didn't allow you to complete it. I think we would normally accept those reasons and then go for a partial payment. Now, showing you how this worked in practice so far, because these numbers may say more than the theory I just presented. We've got nearly 900 closed lump sum grants in Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe together so far, with I think, what is this? 2,500 paid work packages, something like that. And in these closed grants, and what we see is that 99% of these work packages were paid as declared, with 1% of them partially rejected. That means that these lump sum grants, these nearly 900 lump sum grants, were paid to a level of slightly above 99%, which indeed is essentially the full lump sum was paid on average, which is slightly more, as I mentioned, than we see in actual cost grants. At intermediate payment, I said we can also reject work packages. If you declare a work package as completed, the project officer says, no, maybe I'm not yet convinced, you still have to improve on that. You get the possibility to report and to improve it and report it later. So here we see that happening again in a minority of cases, maybe just under 2 in 100 work packages declared at intermediate stage are rejected and have to be improved. In other words, there is a control mechanism. Not everything is automatically accepted, but what we see in practice is that the vast majority of declarations on completed work packages are accepted, and that the vast majority, the vast share, the biggest share of the lump sum is paid out eventually at the end of the grant. So really what we see is, yeah, there are controls, there are cuts as a result, but there is really no evidence that there's an increased financial risk, because if anything, the payment level is slightly higher than in actual cost grants. Lump sum grants can also be subject to controls, and here the summary is every control that is not a financial control can happen in exactly the same way as in all other grants, but there will be no financial checks, reviews, or audits, because your grant agreement does not oblige you to keep any of those documents. So you can, of course, for your internal purposes, for your internal rules, or for national laws, have the obligation to keep financial records internally, but you do not report them to us, and you have no obligation to keep them for the grant. Vis-a-vis, so out of the grant agreement with the Commission, you have no obligation to keep any financial records. That is independent of the fact that you may have to have them for your national, regional, or even for the rules inside your organization. That is a different story, but you don't have to report to us. And this is a summary of what you need. So what you have to keep is every documentation that shows that you have carried out your grant. And this is a global obligation for all our grants again. So it is not different. There is no, let's say, there is no technical document on top of what you have to keep anyway for all our grants. Lump sums do not oblige you to keep more or less than in any other grant. The obligation to be able to show that your project took place is exactly the same. And I give you some examples here. It can be lab books, you can have technical documents, you can have documents to show that you indeed participated in conferences or meetings, anything that shows you actually carried out the project as agreed. In contrast, what you do not need is timesheets. That is something that has been criticized in actual cost grants for ages. And so here you don't need timesheets. We are aware that some organizations keep timesheets, even in lump sum grants, even though they are not needed anymore. But that, again, that's an internal decision of this organization, of these organizations. For the Commission and for the purpose of the grant agreement, you don't need timesheets in lump sum grants. Likewise, you don't need the pay slips, or you don't need to show your depreciation policy. We don't need invoices. We don't need employment contracts. None of that is relevant in a lump sum grant as far as this grant agreement is concerned. And I mentioned before, if you need any of that because that is the rule that you apply in your organization, or because it is needed to satisfy national laws, that is a different story. Of course, the grant agreement doesn't have any influence on these obligations that you have at that level. We have many more information available on our dedicated lump sum page on the Funding and Tenders portal. I would recommend, if you are new to lump sum grants, to start with a series of 3 short videos that we have that really give also a good overview of how lump sums are set up and how they are evaluated by our experts. And I think this knowledge is very useful if you are setting up and if you are new to lump sums. Have a look at these videos. That only probably takes less than 10 minutes to watch the 3 of them, or maybe 10 minutes. And that should really help you a lot, also summarizing what you heard today in this webinar. Beyond that, there is detailed guidance on the page, all the reference documents that are relevant, and also some background information and the studies that we did to evaluate lump sum grants. You can always also, if you have questions, contact the Research Inquiry Service. They will be able to answer all your basic questions, and for more complicated questions, they would also come back to us to provide a more detailed answer. So that is the service to contact for all your questions related to your applications or grants. Then we are still developing lump sum grants further. So it's already been running since 2018, as I mentioned, but the methodology and the tools are still in the process of being improved. I just mentioned we had a second evaluation in 2024. We had an earlier one in 2021. The 24 assessment did confirm that lump sums are quite popular among the majority of users. We have now launched the first wave of ex post technical reviews that are effectively replacing financial audits. So as I mentioned, there will be no financial audits on these lump sum grants in the way that we know financial audits on actual cost grants. And that have also been rather criticized a lot in the past for being rather cumbersome and requiring and involving really a lot of work and risk for the beneficiaries. That doesn't exist anymore, but projects can be, like all projects in fact, can be ex post reviewed for their proper implementation. That's exactly what these ex post technical reviews will do. In other words, they will check, has the work indeed been done to the percentage declared and accepted? In other words, we will take into account if already a cut was made and the work package was only paid 90%. Of course, in the ex post review, we would not expect to see 100% completion. We would just check, indeed, is the declaration and the accepted level of completion of the project, is that borne out by the facts? And at that point in time, we would ask you to supply some of the documents that prove proper implementation, not necessarily all and every last document that you may have, but a selection of documents to show that indeed this project took place and was carried out as planned and as reported. I mentioned already we are going to implement this detailed budget table in the submission system. I think this will address a number of issues we had with Excel. Not everybody has the latest software. There are sometimes problems with the macros that we are using. All of that will be addressed and will then, and sometimes also maybe we have problems with double entry of information as a result of using our submission system and the Excel table in parallel. All of that will be addressed with the detailed budget plan, budget table integrated in the submission system. Already in November, December, we are going to pilot it on a couple of calls, and then we are successively rolling this out to all other lump sum calls in the first half of 26. So at the bottom here, you see our rollout of lump sums. I mentioned we started quite modestly with only about 2% of our budget spent in the form of lump sums, and we successively towards 26-27 go to a share of 50%. Maybe you know the Commission proposed to use lump sums by default in the next MFF, that is from 2028, in the next and the future Horizon Europe program. That is the Commission proposal based on the experience with lump sums so far. With that, thank you very much for your attention, and I'd like to hand over to my colleague Andreia to moderate the session with our 4 guests and to hear their experience with lump sums. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ulrich, and good morning, everyone. Just like in our previous editions, we will have now a panel discussion with our speaker guests who are directly involved in lump sum projects and can share some useful insights, some lessons learned with all of us. So I'm very happy to welcome Miriam Bowles, project manager at the Swiss Tropical and Public Health Institute, a research center based in Switzerland. She coordinates the lump sum project HELP under Horizon 2020. Then a warm welcome to Armando Carillo Zanui, who's Secretary General at Eurnex, European Rail Research Network of Excellence, an association with headquarters in Berlin, Germany. He's coordinating a couple of EU rail lump sum projects under Horizon Europe. And last but not least, from Lund University in Sweden, we have Åsa Gruning, Administrative Project Manager, and Charlotte Lorenz Hjort, Operational Project Manager, who are both coordinating the Horizon Europe lump sum project EQIP. And now over the next half an hour, we will hear from them how lump sums work in practice. And if those of you who are following online have specific questions to address to them, feel free to put them, to ask them in Slido or also to upvote the other questions. We will allocate these questions to our panelists later on, as they will stay with us until the end of the webinar. And to get things rolling, I will start with some introductory questions, and then we will get to some more specific ones. And I will start with you, Miriam. Could you introduce yourself and the lump sum project that you are coordinating under Horizon 2020? So when did it start? At what stage is it now?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Andrea, for the question. So my name is Miriam Boltz. I'm Swiss CPH, a grant manager. And as part of as part of the grants that we manage, we have the HELP project, which is actually the first one that we in the unit managed. It was granted under the Horizon 2020 framework program as part of a lump sum pilot when this whole scheme was rolled out and tested. It's a project that establishes or tries to establish a pan-nematode drug development platform. It's not too big. It started with 8 beneficiaries, now reduced to 7. Has an 8.7 million euro budget. It started on the 1st of September in 2019 and originally was supposed to run for 5 years, but we've been granted an 18-month no-cost extension. So we are currently back to at the end or towards the end of the project. So we have 5 months left. So its planned end is in February 2026.
Okay, thank you, Miriam. Now I will turn to Armando and ask you also to introduce yourself and the lump sum projects that you are coordinating. So when did they start and at what stage are they now?
Yes, thank you very much. This is Armando, and I want to say hello and thank you for inviting me to this very interesting workshop seminar. I am the General Secretary of URNEX, which is an association of rail research departments or university departments. And I am coordinator of 2 lump sum projects that are in the domain of integrating the participation of the academia in railway works that are being done by the joint undertaking Europe's Rail. And the first project is called Academics for Rail. And I didn't know all these interesting things that you've been presented today. So I made in the design of the project many mistakes that affected the cash flow of the project. But still, I think the system is so well planned that we can still survive. And then I got another one, which is the continuation of that project, let's say. And because of learning, now I was able to design it in a way so the cash flow works very well, and it was very easier to design it. I think most of the things presented today are very useful, and I'm ready to answer any questions about when they started. The first project started in 2023. In fall of 2023, and this one that I'm coordinating now started in 2024, so 1 year after. So they are both projects coexisting in time. So I'm coordinator of both projects. We've been reporting, being paid, and being designing the new proposal. So I'm here to answer any question that you want to do. Thanks.
Thank you, Armando. And now I would also like to ask Charlotte and Osa the same introductory question. So if you can introduce yourself and the project, the lump sum project that you are coordinating. Again, when did it start, and at what stage is it now?
Thank you for the invitation. Very happy to be here. And it's been a very interesting and fruitful journey to run a lump sum project. So I'm very happy about the experience, and I think we have had a really nice partnership with our 18 partners running it together. So Åsa and I are working very closely together. Åsa is on the administrative part of coordinating the project, and I'm on the more operational level of coordinating the project. And it's not a fully research project, it's a coordination and support action. And our assignment is to develop policy recommendations for ecosystems, innovation ecosystems, to include the culture and creative sectors. So we're focusing on policies that will address building blocks in ecosystems and how they can be developed in order to include the culture and creatives. I have a background within innovation and also building organizations within ecosystems. So it's very much a task of creating a joint effort in this project. So we set it up when we started in June 2023, and we're ending in November 26, so we have about a year left. We set it up with work packages as a joint innovation process that we call the policy engine. So our VP deliverables are very much dependent on each other, for better or for worse, but it requires really close collaboration and partnerships and interaction to be able to do that. So it's been an interesting journey, and I have some comments later on in the questions as well in this setting it up like this. But having that kind of joint innovation process that we, in the first phase, really iterated with 3 policies, but we're spinning this innovation process 13 times. We're running it like almost as a joint company, but the engine process, as we call it, and developing it further. So for the first year, we set it up and we iterated it. And now this year we've been spinning 6 policy areas, using it, fine-tuning it. And the next year we will develop it further and we will fill the gaps within the policy recommendations. One challenge I would like to give back to you is that when this call was written, it was also a question for us to build a policy platform, a collaborative platform for Europe with networks of networks and a joint observatory and knowledge bank with the outreach of the data and information. And now we're also looking into what kind of legal entity this innovation process that we are developed. Have we developed a policy infrastructure, or what have we invested in? So it's quite fine-tuned with all these different spins. So that's also a question that's interesting for us to explore. What is the outcome of really iterating a collaboration like this? But I don't think it would have been possible to do this project without having it set up as a lump sum project. There's been a lot of focus on teamwork, and also I think we have had almost 90 people working in the project as experts in different parts and phases. And the lump sum really enable all the partners to bring in different experts in different phases. And this has been very important for the outcome of the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. And now, since I have you on my screen, maybe we can go to the more specific questions on proposal writing and grant management. And you also mentioned the collaboration in your lump sum grant. So my first question would be, what was your approach to selecting the partners in your consortium? And did your lump sum grant require a different consortium agreement than other grants that you might have? Yeah.
Parts of this consortium, or quite a lot of us that are part of this, we applied and competed for the EIT Culture and Creativity Kick. So we had developed our partnership in relation to creating a triple helix partnership to be able to execute that EIT kick. So when this application was out, we felt quite ready within the partnership to actually apply for this policy or this coordination and support action together. So the partnership was already there, and I think the lump sum made it possible for us to apply and organize it this way. So the partnership sort of came first, and it was available through lump sum and made it possible. And no, I don't think you need a different consortium agreement. The DESCA consortium has worked very well for us, and it's been fine.
Okay, thank you. And now another question, but related to the grant management. So my question is, would you say that the reporting for your project was easier thanks to the use of lump sum funding?
If you look at on a budget wise or those kind of technicalities, it was easier, but making sure that your deliverables have high quality and taking that responsibility is not more easy, but it's a different task. I think it's been very important that we worked as teams together with the different VP leaders, and also from Lund University, we've had a team supporting different parts of the consortium when it comes to doing the deliverables. So it's maybe not easier, but it's different. And also with this information here earlier on how you can divide in maybe 2 periods, 3 or 4, for us, I would never do a lump sum with under 3 phases, because if you're leading it, you also want to make sure that the deliverables are going the right way and the quality is there. And if you have really long VPs, it's hard if you have operations are almost ended to fix them and to iterate and develop them further. So I really recommend at least 3 phases within a lump sum project to keep track of your partners and the VPs that the deliverables are going the right way. Otherwise, you might end up in the end with a deliverable that's not holding up. And also actually the evaluation with the reviews is very helpful. I think also when we did our first phase with the deliverables, we got really good feedback, and it was things that we also thought might have been weak that they asked us to fix and deliver and develop further. So I think it's also useful to get that review on how you're working and how you're thinking before the project is ending. So I think that's an opportunity that should not be missed either, because that develops your deliverables further and they become better.
Thank you very much for your insights. Now I'm also curious to know about your experience, Armando, since you also coordinate 2 lump sum projects. And my first question for you is, compared to other proposals that you may have submitted, what kind of differences did you notice in proposal writing? What would you advise someone considering applying to a topic using lump sum funding?
In the proposal writing, it requires more effort to plan and, let's say, a budget that is already fixed and so on. So you need to know more in beforehand what is going to happen. But I think that's also an advantage, because having like a ceiling, like this is the budget and you need to fit to this. It also kind of simplifies the thing as well, than to ask each of them I mean to report about the actual cost and everything. And something that I've used that it kind of also simplified is when designing this budget, we were not using like different kinds of personnel involved just to because we normally work with universities, so they have like so many different categories of researchers, administratives, and all sort of people that would create, if you do it like in a portfolio way, like very detailed way, that it creates like a lot of information for the coordinator, in this case myself. So I was putting some kind of like firewall, saying, okay, that's the total budget you're gonna get in this project, like the total funding, and you please organize and you give me just your average man months, and we work with that. So it kind of simplified and give um, the partners like the information about this is how I work, no? The maximum budget, the maximum fund you're gonna get, including all indirect costs and everything. Without it's like a top-down approach how I design, and it kind of worked because they organize themselves. This is something that relieves the coordinator in organizing every single task or man month or any discussion on how many man months. And in the end, we were working with money. And this is also in the reporting has been very much easier for me as coordinator. Like it is what it is. I mean, that's the money we had. That's the job we had to do. And something that was said today is that, well, you don't need to be successful in order to get paid. But in principle, I mean, being successful at project level is to accomplish the deliverables. The deliverables, it doesn't matter if you reach the result or the result is like scientifically or technically sounding, but you did the job. So that to do the job is to be successful. And that's the definition of successfulness for me. So that's something that I use as a tool of pressure to the partner. So you need to cope with the deliverable before the deadline, and therefore, if you manage, we're gonna get paid. So that's also very useful. The organization in different work packages, it was a little bit tricky at the beginning, so not to do like very long work packages, because they are paid only if they're finished before the reporting period. So if you have very long work package, you don't get paid. I mean, you get the prepayment, of course, but you don't get paid until the end of the project or until this work package. So there should be find a way of splitting them in a smart way, especially those of the management and dissemination. I didn't know that at the beginning when I designed my first project. So now I have a very long management work package. So now I need to wait until the end of the project to cash in the part of the management. But okay, now I did it in the second, and also in order to not increase the amount of work packages, so to adapt them artificially to meet all this reporting period, you need to group them in a way that they meet this, but it doesn't explode the amount of work packages that you have in your project. So that was a little bit more tricky. And also, it is also a kind of tricky thing when you have work packages that depend on many partners. So you cannot isolate the failure of one partner in one work package. You know what I mean? I mean, that would be very useful, because if you have one partner that is not going to deliver appropriately, you can isolate him or her this partner in one work package. But as a project, in the end, everyone is binding to everyone. So that's the group, and that's a responsibility of the coordinator, how to design them. So that were my general reflection, how to mount an proposal within this lump sum framework. In general, I think it's very positive for the coordinator, but it needs to have this information about the payments and all this cash flow, and that's very important. So that are my main reflections on that. If you want some more detailed question.
Thank you. Well, actually, my second question was about the internal management of the grant, and you already provided so us with some elements on how to keep track of the deliverables.
Yes, the
Yeah.
deliverable is the master key of everything. Is that the way that tracks the progression of the deliverable, well, the milestones, but it's the deliverable what actually serve as a evaluating point in order to be awarded or not, or to do the correction. So the importance of the deliverable is maximum at this place. How can you report about the work package completion if it's not with the deliverable that summarizes all the work done? Because you don't have any more this reporting of hours or whatever. So it's just the quality of the delivery. I think this is quite good because it focuses on the actual work that is reflected in there, and it's there are also some reflections when it comes to because I had these two partners that are not coming from that not being funded by the commissions, namely UK then back UK partners or Swiss partners that are not included in the grant agreement, but they are binded through the consortium agreement. And all this creates in the lump sum environment, creates some kind of situation because you are in some way in their hands and they're being paid by another entity, but they're part of the project, and the project gets paid because of work being done by these partners that are not part of the grant agreement. So that creates some kind of binding in which the consortium agreement brings an important tool for the coordinator in order to make this happening, the deliverable. So that's things taken account. And unfortunately, I think that also you learn more by in the experience of having managed these kind of projects.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Armando. And now I will turn to Miriam for the last round of questions. And so my first one, did your lump sum project require any technical amendments? And if yes, what were the main reasons, and did it work as expected?
Yes, thank you for that question. Actually, yes, we had two amendments. One was more of an administrative one, but I would still like to talk quickly about that because it's also like the composition of our project, like the partner composition is kind of an interesting mix, I feel. It's like 3 European scientific partners, 2 sub-Saharan African academic/health partners, started with 2 industrial partners and 1 public-private partnership. So, and we had 1 industrial partner being bought, and then the new company decided to drop research on NTD, so neglected tropical diseases. So we had to remove that partner from the project. Luckily, after its main contribution to the project was done. But so that gave a relatively straightforward amendment of more administrative nature. And then we had one very, very large second amendment that we just finalized in Q1 of 2024. It was a combination of a technical and administrative points, mostly due to, I would say, 3 reasons: delays, namely by COVID, because we ran during that period, and I guess normal delays that happen in such long-running projects. Then an increase of prices also. The budget was developed in 2018, and we had some of the implementation in 2023 with COVID in between. So you can imagine what happened worldwide to prices. And our project is kind of special because it's a lot of subcontracted things in the drug development pipeline. We had a small discovery component and then a very large or substantial preclinical development component, and then clinical trials, regulatory clinical trials, 2 of them conducted in Tanzania. So especially in that middle phase of the drug development pipeline, there's a lot of subcontracting happening because the usual partners are not in such projects are not able to do that to the standard that is required and for regulatory purposes. And when, of course, prices increase, yes, it's lump sum. And in theory, we heard in the presentation from Ulrich, it's fixed, right? But yeah, is it still feasible 5 years after the budget has been developed? So we had to adapt for that. And then, of course, scientific things that change during the course of a project. So what we did was we had a work package that we found out later that it was not needed. So we were able to transfer the funds from that work package to other parts of the project. Luckily, even though we had already declared that work package closed, so my advice would be careful what you report and what you put in writing. You might need some things later on. Then we had rephrasing of work package contents, addition of new tasks, because of some tasks we were just because of the science happening in the project not needed anymore, but we decided to use the funds for other tasks that we felt was really needed and justified. We had to, or we were lucky that we were allowed to, in one specific case, to delete a task, so toxicology studies in dogs, to make the work package doable within the given lump sum with the increased prices. And of course, adaptation of timelines. So we got an 18-month no-cost extension, which I think is quite exceptional. It's not usually granted that long of an extension. And that also led to the addition of new work packages for management and dissemination, obviously. So in total, we have now 23 work packages, quite a number. But 9 of them actually are just dissemination, management, and ethics, and 14 are the actual technical work packages. It worked out as we had hoped. However, it was a lot of work, and we were lucky because we had a project officer that really understood the project and was very willing to work with us. So we started, I think, at least 9 months in advance to start discussing the issues we're facing, to start explaining, to have different things in writing. In the end, it needed 5 pages of the justification letter for the amendment was 5 pages long. So it also included a scientific review, which was our first one, because for the first and second periodic reporting, we didn't have a scientific review. It was really worth it, but it was intense.
Thank you. Yes, I think there's a learning curve for everyone. And the one last question, what is your experience with declaring the completion of work packages generally?
So it was interesting to hear Ulrich's presentation, because he mentioned several times, I think, that you just implement the project as agreed or satisfactorily. And also both Charlotte and Armando actually mentioned the quality of the deliverables. So for us, it was there was really a lot of uncertainty, I think, until the second reporting as to what does completed mean. is it the deliverables? Is it the implementation according to the text? Also, it didn't really help that the deliverables we submitted, but they were actually only ever checked and approved with the reporting. So we felt like we were flying blindly for a bit, because we thought, okay, we do our things properly and the quality is okay, but it took a while until we got that feedback that the quality is indeed okay. So in that regard, it was a bit tricky. And what was also a bit difficult was, what's the exact time point when you declare a work package completed? Is it you've done everything which is in the description of the work package, you've submitted all the deliverables, things that happened during those 2 months that you have to prepare the periodic report? Okay, if you finish something within that period, can you still declare it because you just put a tick? That was kind of we were sometimes unsure. And since we were in the conception phase of the project, we were part of a pilot. All that very detailed information that Ulrich presented was not really available to that degree to us. So I would say the design, like the timing of the work packages compared with the reporting periods, was not ideal. So we had some work packages that were planned to be finalized like 4 months after the first periodic report. Well, yeah, and then you wait for another almost 1.5 years until you get it paid. So that was that would be my recommendation. Also, when you design a project in a lump sum, really pay attention to the reporting periods and the cash flow. Also, because we got 40% prepayment, I think, because it was such a long project. I think one recommendation would also be keep track on the adequacy of funds. Regularly check in with your partners how things evolve. Yes, it's lump sum. It's nice to say yes, this is your ceiling, but yeah, keep close note on whether it's still feasible, or you have to have adaptation or to foresee problems. And I would also say try to have a good relationship with your project officer. If that's possible, we had some change. I think we're now with the 4th. But yeah, and maybe if in doubt, be rather proactive in informing the project officer. I think that's what's happening. Try to have a conversation if you see things are going a little bit in a different direction than initially foreseen, and you would you foresee adaptations needed.
Thank you so much, Miriam. I think these are really useful pieces of advice. And I would like to thank again all of you, all our speakers, for the discussion and for your availability to take part in our webinar. I would like to remind our audience, our online audience again, that we will soon look at the questions in Slido. So please, if you haven't done it yet, upvote your question or ask directly yours, and we will address this later on. We will not be able to look at all questions, but we will analyze them afterwards. So I think because we are now already at 11:25, maybe it's not time for a short break. So I suggest that we can start already with the Q&A session. Yeah.
Very good. Thanks, Andrea. Very interesting session and contributions. I actually have few remarks. I think maybe while all of our online participants can put in their questions in Slido, and we are still then going to have half an hour at least to look at those questions. Maybe a few very, very short remarks, and that is from the experience we just heard. I mean, some of that is indeed sort of also as desired and as designed. That is for example, the careful planning, the working together as a team, where that is how our collaborative grants are meant. All our collaborative grants having an obligation to implement the project collectively, and the consortium is collectively responsible for the project. That is the case always. Now, if this aspect is emphasized more in lump sums, that is actually something we would see as a benefit, because that is how the collaborative research is not meant as funding 10 individuals who work in parallel, but who should rather work together in one project. Likewise, of course, the focus on quality, that is exactly what we like to see. That is the increased focus on content, because it matters immediately in lump sums as it is linked to the payment. And maybe one word on the budget limit. Here, I mean, we should be, that is again a feature we have in all our grants. Essentially, people are expected to complete a project. We have a grant agreement that has a maximum grant amount. It doesn't matter whether this maximum grant amount is a lump sum or is an actual cost. Within that envelope, the project has to be completed. And except in very, very exceptional circumstances, we are not going to increase that amount during the lifetime of the project. We can extend the project, but typically the maximum grant amount is never increased, while of course we are aware there is inflation, costs can increase, but that principle, I just want to highlight, there is absolutely no difference between lump sums and actual costs here, because the maximum is not growing. We are not indexing, in other words, our projects. And well, while there may be still some differences in implementation, the principle that we also internally give to our project officers is always that there is no expectation for lump sums to perform better. Just the point that we are using a lump sum instead of using actual costs is just a different means of providing the funding in an EU grant. It does not mean that we expect that lump sum grants have per se a better level of performance than other grants. That is certainly the message, and that is certainly how we try to educate and train our project officers. And if you see big differences here, that is indeed also where we'd like to hear from you. If you really feel that you were expected to perform much better than in other projects, that is not how it should be, and that would indeed be good for you to let us know. Finally, but maybe I can also do this bilaterally if we can still hear from Miriam. That's because the one thing that we've heard now in the last months, couple of times, also as part of our implementation dialogue with our commissioner, there was the comment that in particular clinical studies would be very difficult under lump sums. Now we've heard also the opposite already, as is again not unusual, different stakeholders telling us different things about the same subject. But here that would be interesting. What costs in a clinical study would be difficult to actually estimate and put in the budget table, because afterwards in lump sums you are free to use the money. So what exactly would make clinical studies more complicated under lump sums than under actual costs? That would be certainly very interesting information for us to be able to maybe address that problem. But so far we've only heard the concern, but we've not heard any details why that might be the case. Maybe Miriam, we can, since we should probably now try and go to the we should probably go to the Q&A. We can take up this subject. Also, if there's online participants who have knowledge on this, I would also be interested, but we need to be rather specific what exactly creates the bottleneck, such that we can try and address it.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. I don't know if we are technically ready to look at the Slido.
It will come in a minute.
Very good. Thanks very much. So I hope everybody can see the Slido questions. And the first question is, what kind of documentation are required in a technical audit. So we are indeed specifically calling it, first of all, a technical review, not an audit, because we really keep the name audit for financial audits, because you have, well, auditor is a protected profession, and that is really looking at the financial and the people who are going to review your project, who are going to do a technical audit, are experts, are scientists like yourself. They are the same kind of scientists and researchers who would do the evaluation at evaluation stage of your proposal. So they are not financial auditors. And well, what documentation do you need? Well, you need you have the obligation in all grants to keep the documentation that proves that you did the project. So here in a technical review, you would be asked to send us a subset of this project, not necessarily all, because we are aware that might be like every last bit of electronic or paper record that you have might be an extortionate amount of information, and we don't need to have all of that. We just need a subset of documents that plausibly show that the project was carried out. And indeed, the project officer will give you a list of such examples of in line with the nature of your project, giving you suggestions, but it remains the responsibility of the beneficiary under review to select and submit the documents that they consider show they did the work. What these documents are, or what subset you submit, is ultimately your decision, but the requirement is these documents need to you need to be able to demonstrate you have done the work. During my presentation, I gave you some examples. You can go back to the slides if you like for those examples. Next question. Andrea, would you like to take that?
Yes. So do you have an update on the budget tool that was being developed to replace the detailed lump sum budget table? Do you have a date on a possible rollout? So this question, I think it was already answered by Ulrich during his presentation. Indeed, we plan to integrate the lump sum budget into the submission system, and we plan to do it by end of this year, and to have a pilot for a couple of calls that will start using it, so that we can rolling out also for the next lump sum topics in the work program 26-27. So yeah, this is it. We can go to the
Thank
next.
you.
Yeah.
So let me take that one. What happens if a participant's total actual costs would be lower than the granted lump sum after satisfactory delivery of the project? Does the unused part of the grant have to be reimbursed to the EC? No, it doesn't. That's the nature of a lump sum. I would argue this would be a luxury problem because we are always told, if anything, we underfund the projects, and consortia have not enough funds to complete all the work that is in their grant agreement. But if you are in this comfortable, fortunate situation that you have satisfactorily done the project and you still have funds left over, there is no need to return them to the Commission. Next question.
If the costs are invisible to the EC, can there be some movement of funds between partners, work packages, tasks in case of estimations? So yes, indeed, the consortium is free to spend their lump sum budget as they see fit, provided that they carry out the project as described in the grant agreement. So it is possible to do these budget transfers without actually doing an amendment. But please be also aware that we will, at the time of payment, we will take into consideration the Annex 2 of the grant agreement. So it might also be in your interest to have Annex 2 updated, and in order to have it updated, you will have to do an amendment. But of course, if there are some small changes of budget transfers, so you don't really need an amendment for that.
Yeah, I mean, I would even say, no, you can also have big movements. It's I should really stress there is no limit as such. If you carry out the project, technically speaking, how you use that lump sum is really entirely up to you, because as you mentioned in the question, it is invisible to us. So we don't even know how you use it. We are monitoring your project purely at the technical level. So if you adjust your payment schedule in Annex 2, it is in the first instance, now even it is in order to get clarity for your internal relationships in the consortium. And that may, of course, be an interest of the consortium to have the payment schedule aligned to what the consortium is really doing. But that is really for your internal relationships, and for the Commission, it doesn't really make a difference, because the overall lump sum does not change when you rearrange, when you have less costs for travel, or you have more costs for personnel, or you have more costs in work package 1 than in 3, and you want to rearrange this. You may reflect this in your payment schedule in Annex 2, but there is no obligation to do so. I think that is really, I would really like to stress that. You don't have the obligation, you have the option, if that helps the organization of your consortium. Next question.
Maybe I can add from
Yeah,
a practical,
sure, please go.
Yeah, sorry. From a practical point of view, we also have that situation. I would recommend to fix it, if it's large amounts, to fix it in an amendment to the consortium agreement, for example, because then it's like very clear to every partner, and it can also be tied to conditions, like if the EC, for example, accepts it in full, and then you distribute it, for example, work package 7, like this and this and this to other partners.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for adding this perspective, Miriam. That is sort of, I didn't want to say, well, of course, as I said, since you have the option, it's just that we are not obliging to you to do this. And if it's in the interest of organizing the consortium and getting internal agreement, that is when you should go for it and you should request it. But that is, of course, different from us requiring it. That is the distinction I want to make. Next question. Do we need to fill in timesheets for personnel working on the project to monitor and justify our costs in a possible future audit? No, since there are no future audits, there really are no financial audits, and certainly there is never an obligation to present timesheets. It goes even further, even if you have timesheets, we would not look at them in our reviews. That is simply not part of the methodology of the technical review. Looking at timesheets is not part of it, even if you have them. You will not be asked to present these timesheets, and they would not actually be, your timesheets would not be recognized as evidence that you have carried out the lump sum grant, basically. That is because, well, that's sort of a totally different philosophy, and that is in actual cost grants indeed an element, but it does not play a role in the review of, also in the ex post review of lump sum grants. We will not use your timesheets in case you decide to have them. But just to be 100% certain, we don't oblige you to have timesheets in lump sum grants. If you have them, that is the choice of your organization to do so. Next question. Andrea, would you like to take that?
Yes. So if an equipment is used in more than one work package, does the depreciation costs need to be split for each work package which uses this equipment? Well, I would say yes, for more clarity, and also in the depreciation tab in the Excel budget table, you have this possibility, so you can choose the beneficiary, the work package in which they would use this piece of equipment. So yes, I would say it's better to do it like that.
No, but isn't it like that in the depreciation part of the table you would first give the total cost of that equipment in one row, and so you have one piece of equipment, it has one cost. normally the depreciation cost in most grants. In some particular exceptions, you also get full costs, but that's described in the work program. So, okay, there is a certain amount calculated for that equipment. And then, of course, you can say in a comment field, I want to split these 100,000 euro across work package 2 and 4 and use 50,000 in each. That's a possibility. If you have small amounts, if you have, let's say, if you have equipment for just a few thousand euros, I'm not sure if that is really warranted and if that's needed. And so to keep it simple, then I would probably just put the cost in one work package and not in two. But for bigger amounts, maybe then it is worth your while to be sort of, to be splitting. So it is possible, and again, it should be done with reason, depending on the amount. It doesn't really increase your planning because you need to put the cost for that one piece of equipment in one row of the appropriate tab in the table, and then decide and explain to which work packages you have assigned this. Next question. When exactly do we need to justify personnel costs that are too high compared to those in the dashboard? That is exactly at proposal stage. So when you, because after proposal stage, we are never ever going to look again at your actual personnel costs or at that level. Afterwards, once the lump sum grant is signed, you must imagine the concept of cost doesn't exist anymore. You have then lump sum shares, which is pre-agreed amounts for each partner in each work package. So the concept of personnel cost or equipment cost, any cost category that exists only at the stage of proposal writing and up to the time that we sign the grant agreement, because that's the means to define and justify your lump sum. So at that point, when you put certain personnel costs in your lump sum budget table, which is part of the proposal, and you see these costs per month are higher than what you see in the dashboard, that is precisely when we ask you to explain why that is so and why that is needed. And for that, you have the comments tab currently in this Excel table. The final tab is reserved for written justifications and comments to explain what you did in this table. And so use one comment to describe why you needed higher costs. Second, when the average for each oops, I'm not sure if I understand the second part of the question. When the average for each category of staff, senior researchers, is too high, or if the total person months for the beneficiary are high. Well, I mean, if I understand, of course, the total personnel cost that you request is calculated based on the factors of who is employed, like senior researchers, postdocs, or PhD students, for example, which have different costs, and for how many person months, for what is the duration for each of them. And yes, of course, the proposal generally need to bring out why you need senior staff and why you need it for a certain amount of time. So if you ask for several person years of senior staff or a certain amount of postdocs, yes, you need to, or a certain amount of technical staff, your proposal need to, of course, by the nature of the work that you describe, needs to justify this, both the level of qualification and the duration. So the dashboard is only concerned with one part of that equation, and that is the cost per month. While, of course, the proposal overall needs to still motivate your request for different levels of staff and their and the amount of time that this staff is working in the project. So in particular, if you have a conspicuously high number of person months for senior staff, well, of course, the proposal should bring out why so much senior staff input is required. That is, I think that goes without saying. or why you need so many postdocs, and this is work that cannot be done by a PhD student, for example. So that's your kind of the workforce in your project, needs to be motivated by the project you're doing. And that needs to be in your proposal in general, not necessarily in the budget table where you mostly where the focus is indeed on your costs per month, and that will be checked against the dashboard. Next question.
Must the junior and senior categories on the LAMSA budget template match the Part A researcher table categories? Well, I would say yes, but not only, because so the lump sum Excel budget table, you can fill in a cost not only for researchers but also for other types of personnel, and so the LAMSA budget table takes this into account. So you will have the senior scientists that can, of course, refer to the researchers in Part A budget table, but also to equivalent positions in the private sector, and the same for junior. So, yeah.
Yes, I think if you indeed talk about researchers in terms of academic researchers, which are included in the researchers table, then indeed that should match. But let's not forget there are also participants indeed in the private sector in particular, where these categories do not apply. And then we ask you to use an equivalent. In other words, then use this with the meaning of senior staff and junior staff. And of course, these members of staff would then not be mentioned in the researchers table, because that is really reserved for researchers. Next question. Thank you. Maybe we have, can you explain why the idea of the split of work packages as a way to optimize cash flow if pre-financing effectively provides most of the funding up front? Well, as we heard, it doesn't, there are of course projects where you get a high amount of pre-financing. That is those where you have 2 reporting periods. For the reporting periods, let me explain, we have the general rule that they should be 18 months. So if you have a 3-year project, you should really use 2 reporting periods, one going from months 1 to 18 and one going from months 19 to 36. In that project, in that 3-year project, you would have normally 80% pre-financing. However, if your project is longer, and I think Miriam Bolz mentioned a case where they have 4 reporting periods, if I understood correctly, and then they got 40% pre-financing. If you have 40% pre-financing, then for, I don't know, what is maybe a 4 or 5 year project, then indeed it might be interesting to do this split in order to be able to be paid. I think from the question, I understand it's clear to everybody that we pay at the time when work packages have been completed at the end of each reporting period. So if you have a work package that is lasting till the end of the project, you will only be paid for that work at the end of the project. Now, indeed, if you have 80% pre-financing, you can afford that, and I see no need to split it. Also, bear in mind, we have anyway in all our grants a 90% payment limit. So you will, in any intermediate payment, you will never get more than 90%. In any case. So if you have 80% pre-financing, you will anyway, the payments at intermediate stage are quite limited. And then the remaining 10% from 90 to 100 can always only be paid at the end of the project. So indeed, in this case, splitting is probably not really worth anybody's while, but in cases where you have more reporting periods and hence a lower pre-financing, that might really make your life easier during the course of the project. There was also the consideration from our guests that following up the project technically might be easier when you have more work packages. I mean, That is probably here. I'm not sure. That is an experience, and that is probably also a personal choice. But that is maybe another consideration which came from our guests. I'm not sure if one of you wants to come in on that point again to say why it might be worthwhile from a technical monitoring point of view. Yes, please.
Yes, absolutely. Very important, I think. So as we are very dependent on that the deliverables are made qualitatively and we can deliver them with a big tick that they were approved. If you would hand in a deliverable where the project at the same time is ended, and it might be one that's been running then for a long time, you are quite dependent on everybody else's work, so that VP is not isolated, even though you have independent work maybe in that VP. But to fix that and iterate that when everything else is ending is quite hard. So that's why you need this kind of checkpoints of okay and the work with the others to interact. So if that's really in the end, it's really hard to come into collaboration and really tweak that and develop that further if the project is about to end, because everybody's ending then, and then you have this not possibility to iterate it. So I think steering the project, not steering with invoices and timesheets. This is the way you really need also to steer the project to make sure that the deliverables and the cooperation between the VPs is working. Otherwise, you're a bit left out of that in the end. So for us coordinating, it's quite important to get that check that it is on its right way to a good quality.
Thank you, Charlotte. Can we have the next question?
I can take it. Do we know during preparation what the reporting periods will be to be able to split the work packages appropriately? So I suppose you mean the preparation of the proposal. And indeed, when you prepare your lump sum proposal, you can indicate your preference for the duration of the reporting periods. Please also take into consideration that normally reporting period has a duration of 18 months, but it can also be maybe of 12 months, or this can depend. And the final decision on the reporting period will be taken during the grant agreement preparation step. But you can, of course, indicate your preference already at the proposal writing step.
Yes. Maybe just to clarify, I mean, this 18 months rule is really what you should follow. You use the minimal number of reporting periods that you can fit in. And as a result, of course, if you have a 4-year project, you will have 3 periods, 2 times 18, and then 12 months are left over. So you will, of course, not always have an exact multiple of 18 months as the project duration. So you can have shorter reporting periods as a result, but it should always be the minimum number of reporting periods based on the standard 18 months period for a reporting period. In the event that the project officer during grant preparation does not agree with your proposed reporting periods, you would then, and I think that should be really rare, and there should be a rather clear reason for that, because there is, if you follow the 18 months rule, you should normally really be granted your preferred way of arranging it. Then in the event that this happens and that they insist on using something else, for example, for reinforced monitoring, if that every now and then can happen, that they want more reporting periods in your case, or they want different reporting periods in your case, then you would, of course, still be given the opportunity to also rearrange your work packages to align them for the payment schedule. I know that would then be work at that time, but that should really be the exception, not the rule. I hope that answers the question. Next question. For higher than average person months, I think a previous webinar said to provide justification in the proposal part B, for example, near table 3.1f summary of staff effort. I mean, I'm not sure what is higher than average person months, because whether a participant needs 100 person months or 500 person months, I don't think we have data, or we don't have benchmarks in that regard. I mean, whether you need whether the project as a whole or an individual partner in that project, as I said, needs 100, 500 or 1,000 person months is dependent entirely on the project. So this, of course, again, it needs to be, the experts need to be convinced that indeed your project requires 1,000 person months, and that that you have split them in a reasonable way across the partners such that they can do the work. I'm not sure that we've that sort of there is no, the justification for that is in a way also not different than for actual cost grants, because, well, the resources are checked in all our proposals. So it must, of course, make sense what you suggest in terms of person months, and that needs to be aligned with the work you are proposing. I am not aware that we've ever said you need to explain exactly why you have 100 person months near this table 3.1f, the summary of staff effort. Andreia, do you have any other information on that?
No, I don't recall.
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, of course,
I see that.
you are free to, if you think you need extra justification why you need so many person months, your proposal needs to bring this out. Why do I need the amount of person months I'm asking for? This is why I need these resources. But the level of justification is not different than in other grants, and we don't have a specific place in the proposal to tell us about this.
But I think if you feel like providing more justifications on that, you can, of course, use the Any Comments tab for that of the Excel file.
Good point.
Yeah.
Yes, that is always possible. I'm just, when I read higher than average, that would indicate that there is something like an average person months, and that doesn't exist. That simply, it's not that we have sort of a internal or that we have statistical data on a Horizon Europe project has X person months. The number of person months in our projects is very, very diverse, I would say. There's a very large range of different requirements of person months across different projects, depending on their size and duration. I'm not sure if any of our guests wants to come in on this question of justifying the resources, justifying the amount of person months, perhaps person months per beneficiary. And what if you have any experience with that? I don't see anybody immediately, or is somebody? Okay.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. Please come in if you like.
Yeah, I think also at least we did that. I mean, as you also showed in the diagram before, that the cost is lower in Eastern Europe, for instance. So you might also have, as us, a communication bureau with us, that we get a lot of hours for maybe less funding than we would if we would be in Belgium, for instance. So there is also a planning like that to be able to use the differences for an opportunity for Europe as well. So at least us, we have planned the project a little bit like that as well. We get a lot of hours for communication, good quality hours by using a partner that has in a lower cost country in that sense. But that's also an opportunity.
Yes, that's actually, I'm glad to hear that, because very often the large differences in personnel cost across Europe and beyond are often seen as a problem, as an issue, but it's also true they can also be seen as an opportunity. Good, thanks very much. Maybe we can go to the next question.
Is it possible to use subcontracting in a lump sum project even if it is not specified in the budget section? In standard projects, subcontracting is not allowed unless it is explicitly included in the project. So I think the simple answer is yes. Subcontracting is possible in lump sum grants, and there are the same rules that you will have in actual cost grants. The lump sum Excel budget table has this cost category for subcontracting. You also have a table in part B where you need to provide more details on the subcontracting activities that you plan to include in your project. And you will have also to fill in this table, and this table will also stay then in the grant agreement. So
Indeed.
yeah.
So if you have a new subcontract during the grant, so you mention all the subcontracts in your lump sum proposal that you are planning, and if during the grant you are canceling one of them or you are adding a new one, you would then update your grant, or you report that in the deviations section of your report, of your technical report. That is exactly the same rule as in actual cost grants. You can tell us either through an amendment, or you can tell us through your report in the deviation section, telling us, well, X, Y, that part of the project was implemented through an additional subcontract. If that report is accepted, the subcontract is accepted. Same as in all our grants, no difference. Next question. How do we include in-kind contributions provided free of charge in the Excel budget table? And how does this compare with the budget's lump sums in part A? No, I mean, here I don't see, again, I'm probably not sure if I understand the question, because lumps in the in-kind contribution, which are provided free of charge, are still have a value. And the rule is, of course, that you include those in the same way as you would include them in your budget of an actual cost grant. So you have an in-kind contribution free of charge, but that in-kind contribution is worth 150,000 euros. So that makes 150,000 euro in your Excel budget table. Because the rules for in-kind contributions, again, are the same. I mean, I'm not sure if we have made it clear enough. Every last cost that is eligible in actual costs is also eligible under lump sum. So whatever you would be able to put in your whatever you put in your actual cost budget is equally eligible and can be put in the lump sum Excel budget table. And that, of course, includes in-kind contributions. You need to know the value of that in-kind contribution and enter that corresponding value in the Excel budget table. The fact that it's free of charge does not mean that it cannot be reimbursed, because there is there is cases when maybe personnel is made available as an in-kind contribution free of charge, but that personnel, of course, still has a cost and is still working for the project, and that cost can then be reimbursed as part of the lump sum or under actual costs under the same conditions. I hope that is clear. I don't know if our guests have any experience with budgeting in-kind contributions in lump sum grants. That's already a relatively specific question, but I mean, the overall answer is really whatever you can budget and whatever you do budget in your actual cost grants, you can include in the Excel budget table with the same value. You may have to provide higher resolution in some cases, but that is a different story. The resolution that does in any case, the cost can be included. I don't see any specific comments on that from our guests. Maybe next question then.
So we are now 5 minutes after 12. Maybe we can have the last question.
Yeah, maybe it's a good idea. Thank you, Andrea, for pointing it out.
Yes. So are deliverables enough from the EC side to decide to pay because the period was successful, overall implemented as it was agreed, or there should be other quantitative, very practical results for this demonstration? So my answer will be normally all deliverables must be completed. in order to consider the work package as completed. It can also be exceptionally that you don't manage to submit everything, but maybe all essential work was completed. But I would say yes, deliverables play an important role.
Yeah, I think here we should maybe add, we've sometimes been asked, why are we not paying against the deliverables? And indeed, the deliverables are not necessarily covering all the work that you do in a project. So maybe there are cases when they do, but there are certainly also cases when, if you take the sum of deliverables, that there is still other things. Yeah, for example, very simply, you could say your obligation to report on the project. That is a contractual obligation, but you don't have a deliverable for that. But you still need to do it. So I don't think that always the sum of deliverables is equal to all the activities. So the benchmark that we look at is really, you have a description of the action, and in this you have a table with all your work packages, and the work packages are broken down typically into tasks. And so these task descriptions, this is what you should have done. And indeed, this translates normally into deliverables. So our normal approach would be, indeed, you have submitted and we have accepted all the deliverables. Even there, we can have exceptions. If you tell us why a certain deliverable was not relevant anymore, it was maybe invalidated through the state of the art, and you have done something else, that can also be accepted. Then you have only delivered 9 out of 10 deliverables, but you have explained to us what you did instead, and how this is taken into account in the course of the project, and that can absolutely be accepted, and you can be paid in full. It is really for deviations up to you to explain why you had to deviate, and that can also concern deliverables. So yes, normally all the deliverables should be in. It's the easy case, but yes, you can also deviate. And in theory, there can absolutely be other aspects in your grant, especially, other activities not covered by the deliverables. And then principally, we want to see those as well. But we don't consider those results. We consider those activities or tasks, work that you said you were going to do. And we want to see that this work has essentially been fulfilled, that you have fulfilled the spirit of the grant, let's say, essentially the work that was described. Maybe we can leave it at this point. Thank you very much for your participation.
Sorry, Ulrich. Maybe we can take just one last question.
Okay, good. Yeah. Let's take this last question then.
Yes.
Sure.
So if a coordinator asks us to monitor costs informally, how can we provide this information? For example, how can I provide information on staff costs progress if I don't have to fill out timesheets? This happens very often. Well, I think this was perhaps mentioned that this might be a question regarding the internal consortium agreement, so how you organize internally. So for the Commission, you don't have the obligation to provide any timesheets in a lump sum grant. Then what happens in the consortium agreement? This is another question.
Well, and of course,
I don't know.
For me, you can always provide this information to the coordinator. I don't quite see why you would need timesheets, because you might very often have cases where you know that you have, I don't know, 1 or 2 or 3 staff members working on this project, and one maybe works 100%, and the second one works 50%, and the third one works 20%. So that would already give you over time the progression, even without timesheets. Unless these shares change all the time massively, then it would get more complicated. But and so in other words, it depends on how closely the coordinator asks you. And here, well, you could of course also question this practice of your coordinator, because, well, I think what you really need to be worried about and what you need to focus about is the progression in terms of scientific and, well, in terms of the work of the project, because that will determine whether you are going to get the lump sum. Any financial information internally, the fact that somebody spent money doesn't mean that the work has been done. So well, if that is the practice of the coordinator, of course, as Andrea said, that is the internal arrangement of the consortium. We are not interfering at all. I would just question whether that is, in a lump sum grant, the most efficient way of monitoring the progress of the project. But that's, I think, all we can say. That this requires a reasonable approach. And maybe indeed you can avoid timesheets by just giving a good estimate based on the intensity of your staff being involved in this project. Again, I think we maybe stop at this point. Andrea,
can
do you
I
think
just add
that's...
something? Sorry.
Please do.
Can I just add something to this? I think just looking at the questions that come, and also with some of the discussions that we've had within the KIP, is that doing a lump sum project is a totally different mindset for people, maybe for a lot of controllers who have done regular projects before, is that the focus is much more on the content of the aim of the project and less about money and time in that sense. So I think with that last question, it has to be clear from the beginning that if you are planning on asking for, involvement of staff, or the change of staff costs, then you have to tell that from the beginning so that people have an opportunity to collect this information. It's very difficult to come after a year and say, we want this information. So I think it's a different mindset for controllers. There's less to do for controllers after the grant has been, given. And that's just a different way of working, and much more, like Charlotte says, the focus is much more on the dialogue of the progress of the work that you're doing and the content of that. So I think it's a different shift for people, and that's going to take a while for people to get into.
Yes, I fully agree. That is a cultural change. In fact, also for us internally, and we are doing our best to educate and train the project officers with this new mindset. But I think it's, as Andrea mentioned, there is a learning curve. Osa, thanks very much for this summary. I think that was a wonderful ending of this webinar. Very, very good last words. Thanks so much to our guests for being with us. Thanks for all of you online following us. We are going to look at the Slido questions that we did not have the time to answer today and see if there's anything that can be useful to improve our processes and or our guidance. So there is still developments going on. Bear with us. And we are over the years going to optimize this. And I really hope that with time, everybody will be fully used to this new way of funding research grants. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.